My beloved child, do not scroll away from this screen. I brought you here for a very specific reason today. This is not a random coincidence on your timeline. This is a divine appointment set before the foundation of the world. I have watched you give your very last drop of energy. I have seen you pour yourself out for people who do not even notice you are completely empty. Tonight is the sacred intervention you have been silently begging for. You are so incredibly tired. You are exhausted deep down in the marrow of your bones. You feel like a permanent resting place for the heavy burdens of everyone else. They come to you when their lives are falling apart. They take exactly what they need to heal themselves. They leave without a backward glance or a word of genuine gratitude. And you are constantly left standing in the cold shadows. I am here today to stop this heartbreaking cycle of abuse. I am here to speak radiant life back into your weary and battered soul. Listen closely to my voice. Focus your racing mind on my healing words right now. Do not let the enemy distract you from this holy moment. I see the heavy and painful sigh you let out before opening your eyes this morning. I know the crushing invisible weight you carry on your drooping shoulders. It is a massive weight you were never meant to carry alone. You have been running on an absolutely empty tank for so many years. You have entirely forgotten what it feels like to just breathe freely, to just exist in quiet peace, without having to fix a disastrously broken situation for someone else, without having to urgently rescue another grown person from the obvious consequences of their own foolish choices. My precious child, I am stepping directly into your quiet room right now. I am placing my warm and gentle hand over your racing and anxious heart. Feel my profound and eternal peace washing over your troubled mind. You are entirely safe here in my holy presence. You do not have to perform any miracles for me. You do not have to earn your rightful place in my loving arms. You only need to stop running and simply listen. I see how terribly tired you are of always being the strong one. Everyone around you falsely thinks you are completely unbreakable. They see the bright and convincing smile you paint on your face every single morning. They hear your steady and reassuring voice telling them everything will be perfectly all right. They take your incredible and fierce strength completely for granted. They wrongly assume you never need a safe shoulder to cry on, because you are always the dependable rock for them to lean on. When you try to share your own struggles, they quickly change the subject back to themselves. They talk right over your quiet pain because they cannot handle a version of you that needs help. I see the intensely lonely midnight hours, when the busy world is completely quiet and the bright lights are finally out. That is when your incredibly heavy armor finally falls to the floor. That is when the silent and fiercely bitter tears permanently stain your pillow. The desperate and burning tears you hide so incredibly well in the bright daylight. You constantly ask yourself why it always has to be you. Why you are always the only one making the deeply painful sacrifices. Why you are always the one compromising your own mental peace to keep the fragile peace of others. You jump to pick up the phone when they call in absolute midnight distress. You drop your own pressing and urgent needs to run blindly to their immediate rescue. You blindly give them your precious and limited time. You freely give them your hard-earned money without asking for it back. You pour out your sacred emotional energy until your spirit is completely dry. You give and you give and you give until you have absolutely nothing left inside of your own cracked cup. And what exactly happens when you finally stumble? What happens when the designated strong one desperately needs to be held and comforted? The crowded room goes agonizingly quiet. Your phone screen remains completely dark and it does not ring. The very people who feasted endlessly and greedily at your generous table are suddenly entirely too busy to sit with you in your deep pain. I see the completely devastating loneliness that aggressively washes over you in those dark and quiet moments. The crushing and humiliating realization that you are heavily needed, but you are not truly and genuinely cherished. They fiercely love what you consistently do for them. They passionately love the absolute convenience your presence provides in their messy lives. They love how incredibly easy you make their chaotic and disorganized days. But my divine heart shatters into pieces when I see how they completely neglect the beautiful and tender soul that you truly are. You feel exactly like a disposable, lifeless machine, a highly convenient mechanical tool to be used until it is broken and then quickly discarded in the dirt. You have tragically convinced yourself that this terrible dynamic is the only way you can ever be loved. You truly and deeply think that if you stop being instantly useful, you will be completely abandoned by everyone you care about. You live in a constant and suffocating daily fear of deeply disappointing people. So you quickly say yes when your entire physical body and exhausted mind is loudly screaming no. You violently swallow your own healthy and necessary boundaries just to keep them perfectly comfortable and happy. You allow them to disrespectfully cross the line again and again and again. Because the terrifying and paralyzing thought of losing their presence feels somehow worse than the daily agonizing pain of being constantly used. But I want you to look closely at what this endless and brutal sacrifice has actually cost you. Look at the devastating and profound toll it has brutally taken on your fragile and beautiful spirit. Your bright and radiant light has deeply dimmed. Your natural and bubbly joy has been completely replaced by a dark and heavy emotional numbness. You slowly walk through your long and dragging days feeling entirely hollow inside, like a fading invisible ghost wandering aimlessly in your own life story. I see all of this vividly and clearly. Every single isolated time you felt totally invisible, I was standing fiercely right beside you. Every time they selfishly walked away without saying a simple word of thanks, I was tightly holding your trembling hand. I personally counted every single hot tear that fell silently from your exhausted eyes. I physically felt every sharp and biting ache of betrayal expanding in your heavy chest. You are not invisible to me. You have never been invisible to my watchful eyes for a single second of your entire life. I clearly see the pure and untarnished shimmering gold of your giving heart. I see your genuine and beautiful desire to be good and kind and deeply loving to a hurting world. But they have greedily taken your pure and holy intentions and aggressively turned them into heavy iron chains of slavery. And I am declaring to you today that I did not create you to be an endless slave to the relentless demands of others. I did not lovingly knit you together in the womb of your mother just so you could be a human shield for their incredibly toxic and selfish behavior. It is completely not a sin to feel completely and utterly drained to your core. It is not a sin to feel a massive and righteous anger about the horrible and unfair way you have been repeatedly treated. Do not let anyone in this blind world ever tell you that your deep frustration is somehow a lack of spiritual faith. Do not let the selfishly religious world tell you to simply pray harder and quietly endure their ongoing emotional abuse. Your agonizing mental pain is completely real, and it is 100% completely justified in my eyes. Your burning and explosive anger is the authentic and powerful voice of your soul, crying out for long overdue justice. It is the loud divine alarm bell violently telling you that something is deeply and fundamentally wrong in your daily life. I do absolutely not judge you for the bitter and dark resentment that has been quietly building up inside of you like a massive storm cloud. I do not condemn you whatsoever for deeply wanting to pack your bags and walk away from everyone and just entirely disappear into the quiet woods. I understand that desperate and fleeing urge perfectly and intimately, when you have sacrificially given absolutely everything you possess and received absolutely nothing but empty and hollow words in return. When your beautiful and rare kindness has been maliciously weaponized directly against your own well-being. It makes perfect logical and emotional sense that you desperately want to build a massive and impenetrable stone fortress around your deeply wounded heart. It makes perfect sense that you are simply and profoundly tired of trying so incredibly hard all the time. You are absolutely not a weak person. Let me repeat that vital and unshakable truth directly into your bruised and battered spirit. You are not weak at all. You are an incredibly strong warrior. You are just carrying a massive and crushing mountain that is entirely too heavy for one human being to ever lift alone. You are completely and totally exhausted because you have been doing all the heavy lifting in relationships that were originally supposed to be equal and supportive partnerships. You have been breaking your own back, carrying the heavy emotional bags for grown people who stubbornly and lazily refuse to carry their own weight. Your deep and bone-chilling exhaustion is a very real biological and profound spiritual reality. It is your physical human body and your weary immortal soul, loudly begging for a long and undisturbed season of deep rest. And I am powerfully validating that vital human need right here and right now in this exact moment. I am finally handing you the ultimate and freeing permission you have been desperately waiting to receive for years. The clear and undeniable permission to firmly say that you are absolutely not okay right now. The completely safe permission to openly admit that you have absolutely nothing left to give to anyone else today. You absolutely do not have to put on a brave and stoic fake face for me. You can completely and utterly fall apart right here in my strong and protective arms. You can let the heavy and rusted iron armor crash violently and loudly to the hard floor. You can cry and scream until there are absolutely no tears left in your exhausted eyes. I will never ever turn away from your complicated and messy human emotions. I will never be disappointed or disgusted in your beautiful and honest human fragility, because I know exactly and precisely what is happening behind the dark and closed scenes of your daily life. I know the exact and hidden fearful reasons why you tragically keep clinging to them out of sheer desperation. But the absolute and terrifying truth about what is really going on behind their constant and demanding requests is much darker than you currently realize. I know exactly and intimately why they relentlessly keep coming back to drain your precious well. And what I am about to firmly show you will radically change the way you see your own beating heart forever. My precious child, listen to my voice very carefully right now. I'm about to reveal the absolute and painful truth about the heavy chains you have been dragging. You have spent your entire life believing a devastating and extremely cruel lie. You have completely confused being heavily needed with being truly and unconditionally loved. These two things are absolutely not the same. I need you to hear this deep in your shattered spirit today. They do not love you for who you uniquely are. They only love you for what you can constantly produce for them. They fiercely love the massive convenience you provide in their chaotic and messy lives. They passionately love the fact that you will always drop your own priorities to fix their endless problems. But what you keep blindly calling love is actually just a terrible and brutal convenience for them. You have unknowingly signed a rusted and toxic contract of emotional slavery. A terrible agreement where you must constantly bleed just to earn a temporary seat at their table. You truly thought that if you just sacrificed a little bit more, they would finally see your immense value. You thought that if you solved just one more massive crisis for them, they would finally turn around and protect you in return. But that is not how a transactional and selfish relationship works. You are pouring your pure and sacred living water into a bottomless and dark pit. You are frantically trying to purchase their loyalty using your own emotional and physical destruction as the currency. I am telling you right now that my divine love is absolutely not a harsh transaction. My true love does not require you to constantly prove your worth by utterly destroying your own peace. You are absolutely not a mechanical tool designed to be endlessly used until you finally break down. You are a living and breathing masterpiece created by my own hands. The deep and agonizing loneliness you feel right now is not a punishment from me. The fact that your phone is completely silent when you are the one in deep trouble is not a sign of your unworthiness. It is my loud and urgent wake-up call ringing directly into your spirit. I am pulling back the dark curtain so you can finally see the ugly reality of how they view your generous heart. I allowed you to feel this terrible and isolating emptiness, so you would finally stop seeking water from dry and poisoned wells. I allowed their cruel indifference to break your heart so the illusion of their fake love would finally be shattered. This is the painful but necessary spiritual surgery you desperately needed. You thought their sudden absence was a cruel and bitter rejection. But I am telling you right now that their absence is my divine and absolute protection over your life. I am deliberately moving these selfish people out of your immediate reach. Because if I do not violently shake your world right now, you will continue to give yourself away until there is absolutely nothing left but dust. Look around you and recognize the exact moment you are standing in. This specific encounter between you and me right now is completely orchestrated by my sovereign hand. This is exactly the divine timing I prepared for your ultimate rescue. I knew you would be sitting right there today feeling completely and utterly defeated. I knew your tired heart would be dangerously close to entirely giving up on hope. That is precisely why I interrupted your scrolling and commanded your attention. Your spirit is finally broken enough to actually accept the hard and liberating truth. For years I whispered gently to you, but the loud noise of their constant demands drowned out my quiet voice. You were entirely too busy running to their rescue to hear my warnings. But now, in this heavy and painful silence, you can finally hear me speaking clearly. I have perfectly aligned the universe to deliver this specific and urgent message into your hands today. Everything that has happened to you this week was designed to bring you to this exact realization. The ungrateful words they spoke to you yesterday were permitted by me to finally push you over the edge of your tolerance. The blatant disrespect they showed you was the final and necessary proof you needed to finally open your eyes. I am drawing a deep and permanent line in the sand for you today. The old and painful era of being a human doormat ends right here and right now. But you must listen to my extremely urgent warning about what is coming next. Because the enemy of your soul is absolutely terrified of the powerful awakening happening inside of you right now. The enemy knows that once you realize your true and immense value, you will never be controlled again. So he is going to launch a massive and deceptive attack against your mind in the coming days. He is going to use the heavy and suffocating weapon of false guilt to drag you right back into the terrible cycle. When you finally start saying no to their endless and unreasonable demands, the enemy will loudly whisper that you are being terribly selfish. When you finally establish a healthy and firm boundary, the enemy will desperately try to convince you that you are a bad person. He wants you to confuse the holy act of boundary setting with malicious cruelty. He will use the very people you love to inflict deep guilt trips upon your tender conscience. They will suddenly act like absolute victims when you stop doing everything for them. They will loudly complain that you have completely changed and that you do not care about them anymore. Do not let their manipulative and angry words pierce your newly formed shield. You must absolutely beware of the strong and familiar urge to apologize when you have done absolutely nothing wrong. Beware of the terrifying fear of abandonment that pushes you to instantly say yes when my Holy Spirit is clearly commanding you to say no. You have been conditioned for years to constantly fold and surrender the moment someone is unhappy with you, but I am strictly warning you out of my deep and profound love for your soul. Continuing to casually tolerate their toxic abuse is not an act of spiritual kindness. It is the active and dangerous destruction of the holy temple that I reside within. You are my sacred dwelling place, and I will not allow them to constantly trash my beautiful home. Every single time you say yes to their manipulation, you are saying a tragic no to the peaceful life I have planned for you. You are stepping completely out of my divine alignment just to keep miserable people temporarily satisfied. And I am commanding you today to stop actively participating in your own emotional destruction. You must firmly brace yourself for the intense spiritual tension that will arrive tomorrow. because the people who massively benefited from your lack of boundaries are going to be extremely furious when you finally put up a wall. They will aggressively try to break down your new defenses. They will use every emotional trick they know to make you doubt your own sanity and your own choices. But I will be standing right there beside you like a towering pillar of fire. I am going to expose their hidden motives right in front of your eyes. And when that incredibly painful but liberating moment happens, I need you to be fully prepared for what I am going to do next. My precious child, I am stepping aggressively in front of you right now in this very exact moment. I am raising my massive and impenetrable shield of divine protection to firmly block their incoming emotional attacks. You have bravely fought this exhausting and lonely battle entirely alone for far too long. You have taken entirely too many sharp and painful arrows directly into your completely unprotected chest. Today, I am officially taking over the heavy and violent front lines of your complicated life. I am actively and decisively cutting the toxic and invisible emotional ties that keep you firmly bound to their endless manipulation. I am taking my sharp and holy sword of absolute truth to permanently sever the rusted and heavy chains of your deep codependency. I am carefully removing the thick and dark blinders from your tired eyes so you can finally see the clear reality of their selfish intentions. If certain people suddenly and unexpectedly walk away from your life in the coming weeks, I strongly command you not to cry for them. Do not desperately chase after them in the dark, and do not ever beg them to stay in your daily life. Their sudden and completely silent departure is absolutely not a tragic or painful loss for your bright future. It is my deliberate and fiercely loving act of taking out the highly toxic trash from your sacred mental space. I am forcefully and permanently removing the heavy human roadblocks that have kept you completely paralyzed in constant and heavy fear. I am loudly slamming shut the dark and draining doors that constantly steal your beautiful and radiant light. I am placing strong and fierce angelic guards entirely around your personal and quiet peace, but I desperately need you to actively participate in this holy and extremely necessary extraction right now. I need you to consciously and mentally agree with my absolute protection over your tender and heavily bruised heart. If you are finally ready to let me aggressively defend your mental peace, I want you to make a physical and bold declaration today. Go directly into the comments below this exact video and firmly type this powerful phrase, "I surrender to your protection." Write it down as a firm and completely unbreakable spiritual contract between you and me today. Let it be the official and absolute end of your terrible and exhausting season of being constantly used and coldly discarded, because I am making a massive and completely ironclad promise to your weary and battered soul today. Your long and agonizing season of being a highly convenient human stepping stone for broken people is permanently and totally over. The brutal and incredibly dark days of you setting yourself completely on fire just to keep other selfish people warm are officially finished forever. I am firmly establishing towering walls of blazing and holy fire entirely around your fragile and incredibly beautiful heart. I am completely and thoroughly rebuilding your deeply broken and highly compromised boundaries from the very ground up. From this specific and holy moment forward, setting a healthy boundary is no longer going to be an act of intense fear for you. Setting a firm and perfectly clear boundary is a deeply holy and incredibly sacred act of ultimate worship directly to me. It is you fiercely and bravely protecting the precious and divine temple I carefully built inside of your physical chest. I am completely and radically shifting the entire emotional atmosphere of your daily and waking life. A massive and beautiful spiritual breakthrough is rapidly approaching your heavy front door right now. I am absolutely not promising you sudden and empty material wealth or superficial and temporary worldly success. I am promising you something vastly and infinitely more valuable than any temporary and shining earthly gold. I am promising you a profound and unshakable inner peace that this busy and frantic world absolutely cannot understand or replicate. I am completely opening a brand new and totally glorious chapter in your long and complex life story. A bright and peaceful chapter that will never again be strictly defined by how much heavy lifting you can constantly produce for others. A beautiful chapter where you are finally and unconditionally allowed to just sit quietly in the morning and breathe freely. I am actively bringing entirely new and emotionally healthy people into your immediate and intimate inner circle. People who will passionately and deeply love you simply because you exist in the same quiet room as them. People who will enthusiastically bring massive and overflowing buckets of fresh water to pour into your dry and cracked well. People who will absolutely never ask you to constantly perform or bleed out just to earn their basic human respect. But before you can properly and fully receive this brand new and incredibly healthy tribe, you must completely let go of the old and highly toxic one. You must completely and permanently release your tight and painful grip on the specific people who are fiercely committed to breaking you down. You must completely trust my divine vision and truly believe that the wide and beautiful open space their sudden departure creates is entirely necessary for your ultimate survival. That empty and incredibly quiet space is exactly where I'm going to carefully plant the beautiful and strong seeds of your total mental restoration. Your deep and complicated healing requires a completely safe and completely undisturbed sanctuary to properly grow. And I am aggressively and lovingly building that exact peaceful sanctuary for your incredibly tired soul right now. I am actively turning your heavy and very dark morning into an incredibly joyful and light dance. I am carefully taking the bitter and incredibly sharp ashes of your deep emotional betrayal and permanently exchanging them for a heavy crown of brilliant and blinding beauty. But absolutely none of this beautiful and promised breakthrough can ever happen until you fully remember exactly who you truly are. You have tragically allowed severely broken and deeply miserable people to falsely define your core identity for far too long. They carefully and maliciously convinced you that you are merely a highly convenient servant in their temporary and chaotic earthly kingdom. But I am the great and eternal I am. And I possess the absolute and final word over your true and spiritual identity. I am the ultimate and perfect expression of love that absolutely never demands a selfish or cruel condition from you. And I boldly declare to the entire universe today that you are my beloved and incredibly precious child. Before you ever took a single independent breath or did a single good deed on this spinning earth, I loved you completely and fiercely. Before you ever solved a single massive problem for anyone else, I was already entirely captivated by your unique and stunning beauty. You absolutely do not have to perform like a highly trained animal to earn my deep and unwavering affection. Your immense and incalculable value was permanently and perfectly established the exact and beautiful moment I carefully created you. Look directly at your own reflection right now and entirely stop seeing a broken and discarded tool. See the majestic and heavy golden crown I have permanently placed upon your beautiful head. You are absolutely not defined by the frantic late-night phone calls you answer for ungrateful people. You are entirely not defined by the massive amounts of energy you blindly give to people who will never return it. Your true and holy identity is permanently carved into the very palms of my divine hands. You are holy and royal, and you are absolutely not a desperate and exhausted rescuer. Your ultimate and eternal worth was paid entirely in full by my own precious and holy blood on the rugged cross. It was absolutely not and will never be determined by your daily physical performance or your endless and draining sacrifices. I completely and absolutely did not call you to be the ultimate and suffering savior of this deeply broken world. I already took that massive and entirely crushing job upon my own strong shoulders, so you would never have to carry it. You are completely and entirely free from the crushing and suffocating expectation to be perfectly useful all the time. You are deeply and profoundly loved simply and only because you are completely and forever mine. You do absolutely not need to constantly and frantically justify your quiet existence by endlessly fixing the heavily broken lives of others. You are deeply, inherently, and eternally worthy of the softest and most fiercely protective love in the entire known universe. I know it is incredibly and painfully hard for your exhausted and traumatized mind to fully accept this massive and overwhelming truth right now. Your beautiful brain has been heavily and aggressively wired to falsely believe that love is always a deeply painful and one-sided transaction. But I am gently and incredibly patiently rewiring your deeply damaged and heavily scarred heart right now. I am actively pouring my warm and brilliant golden light directly into the darkest and most terribly insecure corners of your anxious mind. I am carefully washing away the toxic and incredibly heavy lies that have kept you in brutal and dark emotional chains for so many dark years. You are stepping fully and boldly into your divine and royal inheritance today. And as you slowly and finally begin to clearly recognize your true and magnificent royal reflection in my loving eyes, I am going to ask you to do one final and extremely difficult thing. I am going to ask you to bravely take a massive step that goes entirely against every single survival instinct you have aggressively built up over the heavy years. I am about to ask you to entirely drop your heavy and rusted weapons and prepare for my ultimate command, my deeply exhausted and beautiful child. I am gently asking you right now to completely take off your heavy and torn hero cape. You have worn it tightly around your bruised and aching shoulders for far too many dark years. You have desperately and frantically tried to be the ultimate and perfect savior for absolutely everyone in your chaotic life. You have completely drained your own sacred life force trying to resurrect relationships that I clearly marked as dead. But you absolutely cannot heal people who are fiercely and stubbornly committed to breaking you into tiny pieces. You cannot magically fix the deep and dark emotional traumas of grown adults who completely refuse to seek their own healing. That massive and incredibly heavy task is absolutely not your responsibility, and it never was your job to begin with. I am the only true and eternal savior of this completely broken and bleeding world. I am loudly and clearly asking you today to finally and completely resign from the completely exhausting job of playing God in their messy lives. I am inviting you to aggressively drop your heavy metal shield and your deeply rusted sword right onto the quiet floor. I want you to intentionally and bravely stop giving away your precious and beautiful pieces today. I invite you to step fully and boldly into my warm and incredibly safe embrace with entirely empty hands. Do not bring me your long and exhausting daily list of good deeds and endless sacrifices. Do not bring me your desperate and deeply anxious attempts to prove how incredibly useful you can constantly be in my divine kingdom. I do absolutely not want your frantic and exhausting daily performance. I only want your completely tired and heavily wounded beating heart. Hand the massive and terrifying illusion of absolute control completely over to me right now in this exact moment. Release your tight and incredibly painful grip on all the incredibly heavy burdens you are constantly carrying for completely ungrateful others. Let them finally and completely face the necessary and entirely natural consequences of their own intensely selfish actions. You are completely and totally allowed to be incredibly weak and fragile right here in my holy and radiant presence. You have my absolute and divine and unconditional permission to completely fall apart and just breathe deeply. It is my greatest and most profound eternal honor to be the one who finally carries your exhausted frame. Let me gently and patiently wash your deeply bleeding emotional wounds with my pure and incredibly cool living water. Let me completely and entirely fill your terribly empty and deeply cracked cup until it is absolutely overflowing with my radiant love. You have completely finished your incredibly hard and brutal shift on the front lines of other people's wars. It is finally your holy and quiet time to receive the deep and profound care you constantly and blindly give to the entire world. And as you slowly begin to deeply rest in this massive and beautiful spiritual truth, I have a very special and completely holy mission for you today. There are so many other profoundly tired and heavily abused souls wandering blindly in this completely dark world right now. People who are exactly and precisely like you in every single way. People who are quietly and desperately drowning in their own massive internal storms while desperately trying to keep absolutely everyone else safely afloat. People who completely give their entire beautiful hearts away every single morning and receive absolutely nothing but cold and bitter emptiness in return. If you are thinking of someone specific who is deeply and silently struggling with this exact same heavy burden, today I want you to be my bold and holy messenger. I want you to intentionally and immediately send this exact healing message directly to them right now. Share this profound and completely liberating truth with them so they can finally drop their heavy and rusted iron armor too. Let them know absolutely and clearly that I have never ever forgotten them in their deeply lonely and silent pain. Let them deeply and physically feel that my fiercely protective and incredibly warm love is reaching out directly to them through your specific and loving action today. You do not have to constantly fix their massive and complicated problems or carry their heavy emotional bags anymore. You only need to gently and lovingly point them directly toward my massive open and waiting arms. We are actively and intentionally building an incredibly beautiful and fiercely strong spiritual army of completely healed and totally restored hearts together. The incredibly heavy and brutal daily battle for your profound and quiet mental peace is finally and completely over today. The terribly dark and completely exhausting long season of being a highly disposable human tool is permanently and entirely closed behind you forever. You are my incredibly precious and highly cherished royal and beautiful child. You are completely and fiercely and eternally loved without a single heavy condition or selfish demand. So I want you to slowly and peacefully close your deeply tired and burning eyes right now. Completely and totally release your intense and highly anxious grip on what might possibly happen in your busy tomorrow. I am already standing fully victorious and incredibly powerful in your bright and waiting tomorrow. I have already entirely and permanently cleared the dark and dangerous hidden path completely ahead of you. Rest completely and totally now, my absolutely beautiful and incredibly sweet child. Sink deeply and safely into the absolute and unshakable warm safety of my eternal and highly unconditional love. I am always standing fiercely with you, and I will absolutely never ever leave your beautiful side. Type Amen in the comments below if you truly felt my strong and deeply loving presence gently wiping your silent and heavy tears away today.